Evolution MX, just as a bit of a background, is a fully integrated accounting, job costing, and commercial orientated product for customers purely within the construction industry. It offers a range of different modules within its structure, and you can choose which of those are going to be relevant to you. Today, we're going to be specifically looking at a couple of the additional options. That's the CVR module, cost value reconciliation, and also the authorization of payments module, which we abbreviate to AOP. Now, standard functionality within Evolution MX will allow you to report upon your contracts and their performance. So you've always got the option within, say, the contract ledger to inquire upon the progress of a particular contract. Calling up the information there will allow you to see exactly where you are on a particular project. So this is standard functionality, just to give you a bit of background for those of you who aren't familiar with Evolution MX already. We can call up a job and we can see exactly how it's progressing. So we get cost information on the left, cost and budget information on the left, and sales and revenue information on the right. And you've got the ability to drill down into that information, to go and look at the individual postings that have been made, drill down onto the documentary evidence behind, whether that's a document that you had produced yourself, such as a payment certificate to a subcontractor, or whether it's a document that had been received in association with, say, an invoice from a supplier. And that had been dealt with through emailing receipt and then electronic capture of the document attached to the email as you process it and make the posting through the system. So this allows you to retrieve the imagery behind a particular transaction to assist with the efficient managing of particular contracts. And you're able then to retrieve those images through the database that is maintained by Evolution MX. So all the documents that you see when you are accessing the transactional drill downs are stored within Evolution MX's data. So it's not as if they're links to systems elsewhere. And that's typical of the kind of document that you could retrieve. Obviously, we personalize this, include company logos on there for documents that are generated from the system. That information that you're seeing in summary could also be extracted directly to Excel. So you've got a right-click copy to Excel option, which could just do, as the name suggests, it's taking the information as you're seeing it on screen and giving you a standalone version of events within Excel that you could then use to prepare any reporting or valuations. Now, we've also got reporting options available as well, standard reports, but more recently added to this suite of options is analytics, and that allows you to be able to check on the progress of particular jobs. So how profitable particular jobs doing, are they running within or outside of budget, any retention chasing that needs to be done and so forth. So this report writing tool that we've got, that we term analytics, allows you to pick and choose the information that you're seeing in relation to the areas of your interest. So I've got a list of contracts here with some columns that I've selected from a library listing. I just tick the ones that I want to have included and place them in the right position. Perhaps use some color coding to indicate green being profitable jobs, for example. As I go further down, we've got red indicating jobs that are over budget. And from these kind of reports, you've also got the ability to drill down beneath the total cost figure that you're seeing there into some degree of summarization on the main category headings. And from there, you can drill down and go into more detail, where you can ultimately get down to that transactional level of postings that we saw earlier within the contract inquiry. But this time I'm doing it from a report. So from here, if I expand upon it, you can see the individual postings. And there also, you've got the option to retrieve imagery through the paperclip option. Okay, and that is an example of an invoice that's been, in this case, scanned and attached to it, but could have come in through email on a more modern way. So that's standard functionality that you get within Evolution MX. The CVR module within Evolution MX sits within the contract ledger and allows us to be able to take that extra step into managing the profitability of our contracts. Now, within Evolution MX, we've got the ability to nominate a contract manager and a QS per contract. What the CVR does is it gives extra responsibilities to at least one, if not both of those people, to help manage the CVR process. So the menu within the system allows us to start the process off. I'm the nominated QS on a number of contracts. So what I can do is I can step in as QS and operate the sign-off option. What this does initially is it presents me with a list of those contracts that I am the responsible QS for, and also where I've indicated that I want CVR activity. So by no means are we saying that CVR has to apply to all your contracts. You can pick and choose which contracts are relevant. So those shorter term, quick turnaround ones, probably not too relevant. The longer term ones running over months, if not years, could benefit from the CVR process. So as the QS, I'm going to kick the process off on this job A200, and I'm going to hit the generate button. Now, what this is doing basically is it's looking at the contract transactional information that's already there and responding to your input of the date and period that you're specifying here. So if I just take today's date, what the system will do is it will look through all of those postings that are currently sitting on that contract up to the 27th of September, and it invisibly stamps them with a number 12 so that the system knows that they are to be included in what happens to be the 12th valuation or CVR that I'm doing on this particular contract. That then means that anything that's already in advance of the 27th of September will be ignored. Anything which is now subsequently posted to the contract, irrespective of its date, is going to be ignored also because it doesn't have that number 12 stamp on it. So that means that you've effectively ring-fenced a version of events for the contract up to the 27th of September. And you're now able to relax and know that other people can make postings and continue to use the system. Anything they do won't affect what you're trying to do. So it's not trying to like hit a moving goalpost. You've got a line drawn in the sand up to that point in time. So that then allows you to work with the information that's contained within the valuation number 12. I'll use the adjust option here, which allows me to take that information and populate it into your own chosen Excel template. Now, this is purely an example of what the Excel template could look like. It's using formula to extract from main Evolution MX the information that you want to see. So you're in complete control as to what this looks like, color scheme and all, you'll be pleased to hear. At the top, I've got some information which is populating details about the contract, who's responsible, who the customer is maybe, and all sorts of other things. In the next bigger section, it's all about the sales situation. So I've got information there relating to what's currently residing against that contract in terms of the different sales postings that you've chosen to record. So whether that is applications for payment, client valuations matched, or whether it's pure invoicing or internal valuations, each of these cells has been populated using formula to extract the required figure based upon your activity within Evolution MX. So it's providing that valuable information. I've chosen here to brightly color in yellow some fields that are allowing me to make a manual input. So these are adjustments, but they're purely reporting adjustments. We're not going to change the values associated with the contract that we've seen already. It's just allowing you to make some notes to say, for example, well, I, as the QS, have agreed with the client that we're going to raise another 20,000. So I don't want accounts department or anybody else to think that they need to do the same. So I'm just allowing for that so as I don't prompt a further raising of a valuation or an invoice. So you can have as many of these fields. They don't have to be bright yellow. They can be termed however you want. We can store them as what we call CVR adjustments so that you can report upon them. And also you could also bring them forward into next month's CVR if you wanted to, and then make an amendment from them rather than to re-engineer the figures each time. So you choose as many fields as that. Terminology is entirely up to you. Further down then, we start to get the costs. So I've got a big section here relating to the different cost groups, similar to how we saw them appearing within the contract inquiry. You could choose to include current period only, maybe a year-to-date scenario. You could have budgetary figures on here as well. So again, it's all formula driven for you to tell us or tell the system what information you want to have presented onto your CVR. You'll notice also it's in Excel, so it's a familiar environment for most people in the commercial team. Everybody in QS and contract manager roles is going to use Excel to some degree, perhaps also doing their estimates and budgets purely within that. But it means that you're working in familiar territory. The benefits of using CVR inside Evolution MX is that Evolution MX is keeping a handle on it. It knows where that template is. It's not sitting on the laptop of the QS who then disappears on holiday for 2 weeks and nobody knows what to do or where to find it. So familiar territory, but Evolution MX is taking care of the saving. So cost information is being shown there in summary. Again, I've got some bright yellow fields which allow me to make adjustments in terms of things like weekend work or overtime or timesheets that were missed, for example. So you can just manually record an adjustment to that cost figure that you're using for your CVR. The paler yellow fields aren't appearing to allow me to make any entry. are populated through a second sheet. So at the bottom there, you can see my supplier and subcontractor cost tab has been populated by Evolution MX as part of the CVR process with the transaction information that's already known to it. So you get subby by subby, supplier by supplier, an indication of what the costs are that are being considered in this CVR. You can see also we've got indications of purchase order values, for example, which so far aren't being included. You may now know that that purchase order has actually been delivered or invoiced, and you could then record its figure to form part of the live CVR. You could even make adjustments to that, maybe allowing for delivery charges, for example, and also add in other lines. If you've got a new supplier that you know somebody just visited a trade counter for or had an ad hoc order raised on them, they could be added to the list. Anything you do then on this second sheet will find its way through onto the first. Now, we're not saying that's the limit to your CVR pack. You can have multiple sheets beyond that. We're just saying that Evolution MX is really only responsible and interested itself directly in the first two sheets. So you could have a multitude of other workings populating sheets to 15, 16 separate worksheets if you wanted to, some of which may form a lookup and bring that information through onto the first sheet. So it's entirely up to you. We'll always work with you on whatever you've got in terms of a CVR template already and try and mix and match Evolution MX in around it as far as we possibly can. Obviously, there's going to be consultancy work and any implementation along these lines, but we do find it a flexible and very configurable area of the system. So with the cost information present, and as we've seen, the sales and perhaps also the budget, you can then get the all-important calculations performed. So the bottom section of my CVR is allowing me to see maybe what I need to protect as a margin. I'm expecting there to be a margin of 8% overall, and what I'm currently achieving. So we're well on track, not in ahead of that currently. It's the current state of affairs. If I just say OK at this point, I've not finished the routine. I'm just telling the system to save what I've done so far. So the status is reflecting that. It's saying awaiting QS. If I close out of it, I'm able to leave it as it is, knowing that nobody can do anything with it because I am the responsible QS, and I can return to it at any point in the future, fire up the existing state of affairs that I've left the CVR in. Don't need to regenerate it, but using the adjust option, and again, will retrieve what I had done so far in its saved state. So the figures I put in already and any adjustments I'd done would be reflected within the save state. So it's a live and active CVR within the system. Now, as and when I am happy with the completion of that CVR, I can tell the system to sign off. That allows you to put any notes if you want to. You can also just use the Control-T option to automatically date, time and stamp and user ID the notes field. Saying OK will then tell the system that as far as I'm concerned as a QS, that's the job done. You'll notice now that it's moving on to awaiting CM. So I've chosen for it to be led by the QS and then followed by the contract manager. You might choose it to do it the reverse or way round. Each of these people are indicated on the contract to say who they are in the responsible role. So waiting CM means that the QS, for the time being at least, has no further access to it. The contract manager sign-off menu option allows for the system to bring that information forward. And I, as the contract manager, can see what's happening with it. Okay, so if I now go into, you see, I can't generate and I can't adjust the information. I can see the details. So I'm effectively accessing this to be able to see perhaps all of the costs associated with the contract, all the sales that have been included, but also the all-important spreadsheet. So there, that allows me to be able to open up the template that the QS has been working on. This is read-only, so I can't make any amendments to it, but I can see exactly what he's got. And I don't need to go and ask him where he's left it, where he saved it, or run the risk of it being on his laptop, because it's all within inside Evolution MX. Now, although I can't adjust it, the sign-off option does give me an ability to reject it. So if I don't like what I see, and I see that something has been missed, for example, or I want to add something to it, I could populate the notes field myself, hit the reject field, and it will go back to the QS for him to make the final input, him or her to make the final input. And then anything that they then make will then come back through me. So it's not going to get past me until both parties are happy. To support that, I mean, you're probably asking, well, how do I know that there's something that's coming my way? If you're not going to be a regular user of the system who's going to be continually checking for any CVRs that are required of you, you can get an email alert system to support this. So trigger-based alerts can be set to say, okay, I've got a new CVR that needs my attention. I'll get an email, so it'll prompt me to go into Evolution MX to action it. If I at this point to say okay, that will actually take it through to a third stage. Now, this time, the waiting supervisor is something that normally a commercial manager or director would access based upon the personal input from the earlier two stages. It's controlled purely by menu access. So you'd only give the menu option that's being highlighted there for supervisor sign-off to those people who need to or want to have access to this particular function. And it's very similar to the contract manager function. It's going to be read-only. It's going to show the information that's come through the earlier stages and allow for the details to be seen, including the retrieval of the spreadsheet. Read-only basis again, you can see exactly what's been added to the front and or the rear sheets and the subsequent sheets. And again, if you don't like it as commercial director, you can use the sign-off and say reject that, and it can go all the way back to the QS. Okay, giving it some notes. Have another look, or whatever you want to say. And if you reject it, the status will revert back to expecting input from the earlier stages. Okay, so that essentially is the CVR process. When it's complete, then there's obviously the supervisor sign-off will complete that process. It is available for others to see through the system. You've got, through the normal inquiry that we looked at earlier, other people outside of the commercial team would be able to see this on a read-only basis. If I were to go into the contract inquiry that is available as standard functionality, then I can use a CVR tab there to see that the QS is expected to action that current CVR. If I double click on it, I can see the notes that have been put in relation to who's been involved in it. And I've also got access to not only the detailed transactions, but also a copy of that document. So if I'm needing to make a work in progress adjustment or evaluation adjustment at month end, and the information has not been forthcoming through other sources, then I've got access to be able to retrieve that information myself. Okay. As well as that, rather than looking at individual contracts, you might choose to look at the information more globally. So using one of the reports options we've got here, you've got a report generator, which allows you to customize the summary information that's going to be provided based on the CVR activity. So have your choice of report appearing, and this will create you an Excel extract of the required information from the CVR process, including all contracts that were part of that process. So that allows us to see each of the 4 contracts, what the system had recorded at the start of the CVR process, the sum total of the CVR adjustments, although that could prove to be multiple columns if you want to itemize that more detailed, and then the sum adjusted costs and the same on revenue, together with any Excel calculations. So it's a great way of providing you with that information that can assist now with the client valuations and also any work in progress journals that need to be made. So in essence, that's our CVR process. That was quite a quick run through of it. Quite happy to revisit that with anybody who wants to see it in more detail, and equally any of the other functionality that we've talked about in and around the CVR process. I'm quite happy to be involved on a one-to-one basis with you. Just let the marketing department know when they make contact with you subsequently. Evolution MX offers the authorization of payments module as an ancillary to the subcontractor's ledger. This allows for the managing of subcontractor payments. Based upon applications that have been received from your subcontractors, you can control through the commercial channel what the payment needs to be, so that when the accounts department are needing to raise payment certificates to the subcontractors, they're going to have the input from the commercial team already. Now I'll start the process off just by creating a quick purchase order for you, just as we see where that's coming from and the figures make sense to you. So Evolution MX is based upon the subcontractor order principle. So a subcontractor order would need to be recorded or at least raised on the system. I'll just do it here for a selected contract, job number 0737, and I can use my one of my subcontractors. You get nice little warnings telling you things like insurance is expired. And if I go into the category, I can build up the content of what I want this purchase order to be. So I can just confirm there's going to be an application on it. I can then confirm that I'm going to have some measured work, £1,000 worth. The system will allow you to recognize the defaults that you've set against that subcontractor for things like retention and discount. You can change them or remove them here if you want to, leave them, but they can also be overridden further in the future. So I'll just leave them as they are for the time being. Maybe put in a line for, alongside the labor, I'll put in some materials as well. Okay, just say okay. So I've got a 2-line order that I've now got the option to be able to email out to the subcontractor, copying in using the CC option anybody else internally that maybe needs to see it, attaching other documents as well at the bottom. I'm not going to go through the subcontractor ordering process in any more detail than this, but again, if it's something you want to see in more detail, then please do let us know. So I'm just going to print that so as I've got a confirmation of a new order number 155 against which I can record the application and control the payment of that. Okay, so I'm going to email that purchase order out to the subcontractor directly. Evolution MX is also storing a copy of that document as well, so you've got it retained against the transaction. So when the subcontractor then makes an application, somebody just needs to record that within the subcontractor's ledger. So using the post transactions option, this may be somebody in an accounts role or somebody in the commercials role, whoever really gets the application in the first place. So I'll post it as an application transaction, and we'll be able to select then who's it from. So it's from my UK ducting subcontractor, and against which of the orders that they've got within you, or which engagements is this application relevant. And in there you should see today's order, number 155, sitting there for £1,500. So I'll call that up, record any subcontractor's reference, maybe that's a reference they've put in the corner of the document, perhaps have a scan of a document, maybe their physical application that you've scanned and you want to have attached as a document against this posting is available to you as well. So I'll say okay. All that this requires is that you record the value of the application. So it doesn't have to be anyone in a particular specialist role. It's just somebody acknowledging that from an administrative point of view, at least £1,200 has been requested from this subcontractor. Now that can record it purely as a memorandum or could affect the true cost on your contract. It's one of the system options we've got available to you. Your choice as to whether you want that to be seen as a realistic cost now on the contract, or you're going to wait until it goes through the full sign-off process. So the transaction is on there, the application. We know it's there. We can see it against the subcontractor. We can now invoke the authorization of payments process, very similar to the CVR process in as much that we've got 2 roles available. We've got the QS role and or the contract manager role. So I'm going to start with the role of the QS in my case, where authorization of payment is where I will now see or be given the option of responding to those applications that have been received against contracts where I am the QS. So contract number 155 is there, 27th of September. If I call that up, we'll be able to see down the bottom right-hand corner, you've got the order value of 1,500. The columns across reflect the lines that I put onto the order. So there was a line for labour and materials, because potentially under CIS, at least, there's going to be the requirement to maybe isolate the materials so they're not forming part of the CIS calculation. The application value is being shown there as well. So as the QS, I could now say what it is that I'm going to OK for. So I could be saying that there's £900 on the measured work, and maybe we've got 200 on the materials. The calculations are being invoked based upon the order. So you remember the 10% retention that we saw earlier in the discount. At this point, if you want to remove them or reduce them, you can do. You've got the application write-off option there as well. So if you are of the opinion that the subcontractor is being a little over-ambitious with his application, you could reduce that so that it's not going to hang around and expect to be paid through a further payment. As it is, I'm leaving £100 there out so that it could be picked up later. It may be just paid as a separate payment, or it might be incorporated with a further application on a cumulative basis. Now, if you're not making a payment of the full amount to the subcontractor, you might just want to use the subby notes at the bottom, because we can produce a document that tells him why the payment is short. The internal notes are for internal purposes only. So they could be used for you to record the real reason why you're not making payment to the subcontractor. Just don't get them mixed up. These can be formatted to appear on the documents if you wish. So as it stands there, I've got the expected payment 949 at the bottom there. I'll just say OK. That is complete as far as I'm concerned as the QS. You have a choice now as to, firstly, does it need to go to a second person for sign off, or does it go directly to accounts? That could be a choice. It could be that it does go to a second person and that second person is nominated on the contract in the role of contract manager. Or the third option you've got here is it can prompt you to say, well, who does it go to for the second sign-off? This could be useful in a situation where you've got different skills or disciplines, maybe M&E work, for example, where depending on the nature of the application, it maybe needs to go to one person for the mechanical and to another person for engineering or electrical. So your choice here as to whether it prompts you or it just knows who to send it to, or it just doesn't go to the second sign-off at all. So I'm going to select myself here just so that I've got a control on it and I can take on the role now of the second individual through the sign-off of payment. That will then show me as contract manager, those applications have gone through the necessary first stage. So I can call that up. I then have all the information that was put in through the QS's role, all grayed out though, as you'll notice. So as the second level, I'm not able to make any changes. It's read only. It does allow me to add to or alter the notes there. And crucially, it does allow me to reject. So if I'm not happy with the makeup of the payment that's going to be made against this application, I can reject it with suitable notes back to the QS. He can then reformulate the work and then pass it back through me. So it's not going to get past me until I'm happy with it, and equally so is the QS. But other than that, I can just say, okay, that's good to go. Puts my stamp on it. It then means that the option is available for producing a document, a sign-off document. You can label this document however you like. Some people use it as a basis for a payless notice or a withholding notice. So it's your choice as to what it looks like. It is effectively just an advance notification to the subcontractor of what they're about to be paid. So it does give them scope to object or contest it. It can be emailed out to them. As I say, don't worry too much about the formatting of it. This is something we'll discuss with you on a personal basis. It allows them to see what the value of the order was, the 1,500 that you saw me put in earlier, the value of the application, and how much is being certified for them, along with, right at the very bottom, I've got the subby notes, which is giving them any reasoning as to why maybe they're not getting the full amount expected. So that's an important document. The payment is still pending until accounts department step in, and using the posting option that we use for application, they can now post a certificate based upon those sign-off values. So calling up the post transactions, I'll be able to say this is a certificate, and I'm actually paying authorized. So just select the yes option on pay authorized just to pick up those that have gone through the AOP process. Authorization of payments being AOP, of course. That's showing me the one that's gone through the necessary sign-off. I can call it up now. I get another warning about things like insurance having expired, because just in case nobody else has done anything about it so far. And I can have access to some entry of the figures. So the white areas is where I, as the accounts person, can step in. So I'm able to deal with any CITB levy deductions that are relevant. The taxable amount is also an important figure to be able to access, because if you didn't have the benefit of having the labour and the material split, as I've done through two separate lines, you may have a single column, some of which is subject to CIS and some of which isn't. So you can make an override of that so that the CIS calculation is correct. You could also change the VAT status, should you need to, from any of the VAT rates that you've got set up, although that should be defaulting correctly from the subcontractor. Also an option for contra. So if you need to reduce your payment for use of company vehicles or uniform, whatever it may be, then you can reduce that payment using the contra. That then sits into a contra control account, and you can make the necessary adjustment from that yourselves. But other than that, the beauty of the authorization of payments process, or AOP process, is that as an accounts function, you don't really have to question what the makeup of the payment is, because that's gone through the necessary sign-off of the commercial team. All you then need to do is say, okay, that's good to go. I'm happy with those figures. Transaction is complete. All AOP is processed. That will then allow for the update to be made through to the accounts, allowing for production of the certificate. Just before we do that, the final checks will be made in terms of CIS, okay, where we can pick up on all of those payments are due before a particular moment in time. So let's just put it further forward enough. And that will say, well, these are the ones I'm about to make payment to. You can see that top one can't be paid because there's been no verification received on CIS. So it is imposing those important controls. I can just pick the one or ones I want to have made as payments. That will allow for a BACS file to be created and also the all-important payment certificate. So the actual payment certificate has been made to the subcontractor, the supporting documentation, as well as the payment itself can be produced electronically. So this could contain multiple certificates for many different subcontractors. You can produce them all in one go. The actual payment certificate detailing what it is they've been paid for. Okay, so that allows you then to manage the whole process of paying your subcontractors, involving the all-important commercial aspect as well. So rather than it just sitting as a pure accounts role, it's involving the commercial team as well. At any point, you're able to see where you are in relation to your subcontractors. One of the standard reports we've got, something like the total liability report, could be used to give a reflection as to where you are on a subcontractor and the different orders you've got and where those payments might be sitting. So as a standard report, this is going to summarize for you, perhaps for a selected subcontractor. If I'd isolated the range, my occasion, it's going to show me everything. So if I just skip down to the subby that we were looking at, UK ducting, we could see amongst others, we've got a line there for the order there. 1,500 was ordered, 1,200 applied for, 1,100 certified. So it's showing you what's outstanding, including any retention figure that might be relevant. As a standard report, you're free to print that. You could save it as a PDF. You do also have the Excel download to save it as an Excel file. So that is the authorization of payments process, the AOP module, as we refer to it, nestled within inside the subcontractor's ledger, allowing you to make those all-important control payments with important information gathered from the commercial team and then formatted through to the accounts for them to raise the all-important payment certificate.